Life is complex, so is our mental health. It cannot be understood by diagnosis alone. Our philosophy is treat the person, not the mental illness. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humanizing Mental Health. I am Trent Nakers.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
Yeah. What are we talking about today, Jer?
Yeah, so there's something that came up with one of the doctors that I work with at the military base, and he was talking about understanding motivation. And I think that there's a couple of pieces to this. Like one of them is about that human aspect of motivation in general. And the other aspect, I think, is about motivation as it relates to someone being ready to make changes in their life.
Yeah, and like when you brought that up, I mean, the first things that pops into my mind is, of course, the trans-theoretical model of change.
Yeah, for sure.
Like where they are, and I'm sure that we've mentioned that on the show. But the thing, for those of our listeners that may need a bit of a refresher, that are just tuning in, the trans-theoretical model of change is basically pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and then maintenance.
Yeah, in fact, to give some background on that, well, I was working at the Calgary Counseling Center, and I also trained there as part of my clinical training, and this is one of the things that they gave us specific training on because they used it in their process in a very specific way. So individuals that were coming in to the Calgary Counseling Center, when they first came in, would fill out a form. It's called the Eureka. It's an acronym. I don't remember what it stands for, but it measures readiness for change.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so what we would do is we would take the score. We would actually plot the score, and it would come up with a profile, and that profile would tell us where they were at. If they were in pre-contemplation where they don't see that they have a problem, if they were in contemplation where they could consider the problem but they were not actually making active changes, if they were in the preparation stage, or if they were in action, and it allowed us to meet them where they're at, which is very useful because we used it very specifically with the groups that were for domestic violence, for individuals that were charged with domestic violence. We would not allow them to move into group until they had moved into contemplation.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would definitely be really key because, I mean, if they don't even see that there's a problem, then I could definitely see how that would derail the group process.
Yeah, for sure. And so to back up a little bit more, where does this come from? So Prochaska and DiClemente, and I don't even know if I said those names right. I apologize to them out there in the world if I got their names wrong.
No, I think you did.
So they did a meta-analysis. Clearly you're aware of this, Trent, but for our listeners, they did a meta-analysis. In other words, what they did is they took data from lots of other research that was already completed, and they did this analysis over 40 years worth of outcome studies, and they were looking for what is it that works in therapy. And their conclusions were, well, whether you're doing some kind of cognitive behavioral therapy or a solution-focused therapy or so forth, they seem to work about as well, each one of them. And so they went, if that's not the factor that is really the most significant factor in predicting change, then what is? And they then came to the conclusion around readiness for change and about someone's internal, well, their motivation to change.
Yeah. And, when you bring that up, like I almost think about external and internal locus of control when it comes to that, especially because I don't know if how often you've had this, but I've had this sometimes too, where people will come in and will be like, oh, my mother wanted me to come, my brother wanted me to come, my significant other. And I mean, well, that is, a reason for change. I mean, they may not be even in the pre-contemplation stage. I mean, they just may be checking a box.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I entirely want to revisit that. I think that is a big part of the conversation, because one of the things that Prochaska and DiClemente did is they reorganized or the idea of what is change. And people would think, when has someone changed? Well, they only see action as change. They only see when someone has stopped smoking and they have an extended period of time when they're no longer smoking, that they've stopped drinking, or there's this significant shift. And the number of times that I've heard someone say, well, you know what? I tried to quit smoking a bunch of times, and then one time I was just driving my semi-truck down the highway, and I just reached into my pocket, grabbed out the pack of smokes, threw it out the window, and never went back.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because, like, when you talk about that, I almost think about the iceberg theory. There, people only see the tip.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not about everything else that's going on, or even too like let's go back and let's look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's go from the biopsychosocial perspective and okay, what was everything going on in this system that either supported them or encouraged their change?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think a really big piece of it is they think that they changed in that moment. And that is not true. They did not grab their smokes, throw it out the window, and change in that moment.
No.
They spent all these years trying. And actually what they were doing is that they were moving through those stages of change. They just didn't have a sense of awareness of it. The 10 years before that they had been trying to quit smoking, every one of those times they were trying was building towards the one in which it became successful in the end.
Right, yeah. To use an analogy, we would almost call that a dress rehearsal, or if we were to really look at that from a neurobiological sense, they were building up those neural connections, and finally everything inside of them and within their environment just met to a point where, now this can finally take place. That's why my mother is actually a smoker, and, my father is always on her, quit smoking. And, and I've looked at him, and because he will always say, oh, she's pounding more nails into her coffin. And, and I look at him and I said, well, Pop, I said, if you would actually stop stressing her out and giving her the hammer, then maybe she would stop pounding so many nails into her coffin.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so people then have this from the outside. Sorry, start that again. From the outside, people only see the moment of change, and individuals that are going through the process often don't even see. They just see a failure and a failure and a failure and a failure, rather than understanding actually that they are building in their motivational process towards change.
Or I even like the fact that, for example, people that are drinking, right, they feel like they need to go into rehab in order to get that successful change. But some of them too, in preparation for rehab, will even start cutting down the drinking themselves.
For sure.
So we have to look at those internal resources and the work that they've done and honor that.
Yes, exactly. It's about honoring the process, and about from the individual that's looking at change, about understanding how they can build into that next step, how they can make the next step more overt and less covert. And this comes back to the notion of motivation. So when the trans-theoretical model of change that we described, that was developed by Prochaska and DiClemente from their research, the intervention process that was then connected to it is called motivational interviewing. It is about then identifying where someone is at in their state of change, meeting them there and going, what is it that we do to help facilitate them to that next step? So someone that is pre-contemplative, they go, I don't have a problem. Then the step that the the helper would be connecting with would be doing a cost benefit analysis. Would be, what is this costing in your life and how is it benefiting you? Because if it wasn't benefiting you, you wouldn't continue to use it. Whatever that is, if it's a behavior, if it is an emotion state, if it is a substance. And then from there, as they move into contemplation and you see them moving into contemplation, then you're working with that position in which they start to see the costs, but you're not rushing them into, okay, now we're going to do all these specific strategies. We're going to do because if you do, you'll still mismatch them and they won't progress. So it doesn't fully answer my colleague's question, but this is some of the material, because there's another piece of this, at least I think there is. And it's what you mentioned earlier that I tagged, I want to come back to. That is, what motivation, not just around readiness for change, but what is it pragmatically that motivates someone to enter therapy? Or what is it that motivates them in not just therapy, but other aspects of their life?
Yeah. And it's, I think that's such a key part, because I think there again too, that also comes down to agency, how much agency they feel in their life, whether they're just reacting to their environment or whether they feel like they're really driving the bus. And like I said, I've had so many clients that come in and they feel like they're doing this for somebody else or for their family.
Sure.
But okay, like what benefit is that for you? Because you can do that for other people, but then you're not going to be as invested, because the minute that is no longer around, no longer relevant, or like let's say, oh, my mother wanted me to be here. Well, then basically they're a mandated client.
Yeah.
And you almost have to say to them, okay, to create that sense of agency, it's like, okay, like let's flip the script here. Let's say, okay, your mother wants you to be here, but what do we need to do to make sure that you don't need to come back anymore?
Yeah, for sure. Like what is it that your mother would see that would be different, that would say to your mother that you've accomplished what you need to do here? Yeah, like because it starts to then open them up to looking at that other person's perspective, and maybe even seeing the problems, because maybe someone else can see the problems and maybe they can't.
Yeah. Well, or there again too, and I was even reviewing some videos last night where it's looking at therapy from a family systems perspective, specifically. Like it was looking at couples and it was looking at kids, and basically the idea is that in order to really understand, specifically for children, you can't just see the child, because I mean, like you have to see how they're reacting to the family system, and then what's the motivation behind there, and then even talking to the mother, because it may even be forgive me if I'm rambling here, like the mother may be seeing the child as the problem, but okay, what else is in the system that really needs to change?
Yeah, for sure. Like it comes down to what is the problem definition?
Absolutely.
And who is it that's defining the problem? Is it the person that's in front of me that is coming with this internal motivation that they are defining a problem in a specific way? Is it the court system that is identifying the problem? Is it a parent? Is it a spouse? And knowing that those stakeholders actually are a big part of the motivation that someone would be seeing you. There was a time that I had someone that was mandated by court because of charges that had happened, and they came in and they didn't know that there was going to be any fee for service. It was based on a sliding scale, so it was like $6 or $8 or something per appointment. And the person said, well, I'm not going to pay anything. I said, that's okay. Just let your probation officer know that you're not coming back. And then just sat. Because that position around power, that wasn't going to happen. That I'm not going to like somehow force them or so forth. That won't work. It's not me that is going to do that, as I need to be able to be lined up. And so then the person went, yeah, okay, I'll pay the $8.
Yeah, and the thing is, on one level, I mean, if you look at that from the outside, I mean, that could almost be viewed as very punitive, where it's like, okay, well, tell your probation officer, and then you're going to interact with the system. But it's like, well, okay, well, I'm not going to be that individual that's going to tell you. No, I'm going to be here to support you.
For sure. And if $8 is going to be enough that you're not going to engage, then that's not something that I can do anything about, because it means that no amount of anything else we're going to do is going to make any difference.
I mean, it doesn't even matter if you give him 2 cents worth of advice, because it's about how is he going to spend that advice for himself.
For sure. And so clearly for this person, the motivation was, I don't want to go to jail. Then, and hopefully over time, then that develops into something else. Develops into a more connected place in which they see the benefits for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean right there too. Like that's where, like the minute I hear, okay, I don't want to go to jail. Well, and then I also hear like, okay, what do we need to do to keep you out of jail, or even like what are the factors that maybe will be putting you back in jail?
For sure. In fact, I'm going to pose to you the kind of statement / question that the doctor was posing to me. So there's individuals that get in, say, a house fire, or they're in like an apartment fire, and they'll actually just give up. And they won't actually do anything to try to save themselves. They'll see it as not possible or whatever, and they'll just give up and they'll die. And that was the question he posed is, how does that happen? Like how is someone motivated and someone else is just not motivated even to save their life?
So, I mean, as soon as I hear about that, I can't help but think of Spiegelman's learned helplessness. Like, where I'm wondering for me or for them, like, if they have just been in environments over the years where they've learned that whenever they go up against a system or wherever they fight for freedom, that they're constantly going to get shocked or going to get put down, and where they basically learn that like where it's the dorsal part of the vagus nerve system that becomes stronger. So it is the tonic immobility, because why would I bother expending that level of effort, because it's not
going to work out.
Yeah, it's not going to be rewarded.
That's fascinating. Like I think about my own life, and I think about how I spent my energy. I'm 46 years old, and about what motivated me towards that.
I thought you were 42.
No. That was Elvis. Elvis was 42 when he died. I said I need to lay off the peanut butter.
Okay. Yeah, sorry folks. That's a conversation off mic.
Yeah. But. So I look at my life and I think about my own history, and never went without, food, shelter, clothing. At the same time, my experience was one in which my family moved around a lot. Like my memory actually even is attached to, I remember when something happened by where I lived at the time.
Interesting.
So in the last, whatever it's been since 2007, since I lived in Medicine Hat, people ask me something, I was like, I don't know when that happened. I've lived in Medicine Hat the whole time, so I don't know when that happened. But my point is that we moved around a lot, and in part because my dad, who was a really hard worker, but he always kind of saw that there was something better. And
grass was always greener.
And it actually really interrupted the stability of an economic stability. Does not work well when you're hopping around all the time. And so it meant that I felt like financial insecurity, that pressure You know, and growing up in the 80s in a very long recession with all of the Reaganomics and Thatcherism that was happening at the time, the idea of the future was really scary, that I'm going to be able to have enough money that it's going to be my responsibility to provide, and I didn't believe that was going to be possible.
Yeah.
And so then what did I do? I spent most of my time and energy. It motivated me to make sure that was taken care of.
Yeah, and like when you say that, it almost makes me think of like people within the family system. You either align with the family system of like, okay, like let's say your father or mother was a bit of a bully. You either become a bully or you go in the exact opposite direction.
Right. Yeah. Like the notion of rebel versus imitate, for sure. And so when we look at that in terms of motivation, is my life experience just motivated me. The meaning I made out of it, internalized, then motivated me towards that end. And there's costs, I think, with every single thing that we do with that. But really the big picture here is recognizing motivation. So like even in your own life, you have a master's degree, you worked very hard for that. Not that everybody works hard for that. But at the same time, there are specific things in your life that are different than others. I'm wondering about your motivation, Trent, and what motivated you in your life. And I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, actually, you know what? If this is a weird tangent, you could like, I'll come back, and because it's interesting that you bring that up, because it brings up something else that I had come up for me actually yesterday. And let me expand. So my parents were on me to go with their accountant. I'm like, they wanted me with our accountant. Our accountant's great. Our accountant's wonderful. And so I'm like, okay, well, you know, as a good son, you go, you meet with the accountant, you see what they're like, because you want to please them. And I mean, this lady, lovely lady, I'm like, she's very knowledgeable, does a great job. But the thing is, and not that this isn't valid, but she only, like, her specialty predominantly is providing services for people with disabilities. And I, you know, and initially I thought, okay, well, I'll take her on because she knows this. But then the thing is, for me, is that, and this is going back to just sort of that motivation word, do I want to be defined solely by my disability?
There sounds like a pretty important motivator there.
Yeah, and you know, and like the thing is that and even like looking back on my disability, like how my family framed my disability, where it's not something that it's a part of my identity and it is my primary status, but it's only a part of who I am, and I kind of accommodate it. I don't want it to be solely how I'm seen and understood, as you and I have both talked about. Like when I frame my story, I don't want to be seen as the quote-unquote super cripple, the individual that overcomes odds. And so for me, whenever I've looked at doing challenges and going to take on things like a master's degree or like living on my own, yes, it is far more challenging for me, and you know, it would be very easy to just give in to my primary status and, you know, not have gone on to post-secondary or not have lived on my own and lived in a care facility or in a group home. But that is not the life that I want, because I am motivated by this ability to forge my own path.
Yeah, and yet a lot of people would simply just
acquiesce.
Yeah, give in. This is just how it is. There's no way I'm going to do anything else. And it's fascinating to hear me to hear you say that to me, because you have overcome a whole bunch of challenges. Like that's just simply true. It isn't like that's simply true.
But, like to quote Yoda, do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
I just like, people like, and here's the thing. I appreciate that you see the fact that I've overcome all of these challenges. I'm grateful that you take from that. I'm grateful that other people find inspiration in that. For me, this is just what I do because there is no other option. There's just get up and keep moving.
Sure. And you're speaking about something that maybe it's just so untangible, because you are speaking about motivation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because, yeah, I don't know. Because the thing is that I could choose to give in. I could like there are days where I question, where I'm like, oh, yeah, like for example, sometimes like even this morning, and like I'm getting up this morning, like I've had a good sleep. I usually don't sleep very well, and I'm like, I would just kill to be able to just get out of bed, make my own cup of coffee, and just have a moment by myself and not have my caregiver. Caregiver, wonderful person, but I don't ever literally spend a day by myself. And I could take that moment and wallow in that and look at what I don't have, which I honor. But at the same time too, I also recognize what I do have, and rather than looking at what I can't control, I look at what I can control.
Yeah. And I think, coming back to this, I think the doctor was like, how do we somehow capture this? So, and I don't know. I'm like, I think having the conversation, I think talking about it is important for people to reflect on where they are themselves, to reflect on how motivation works in their life, to reflect on possibilities maybe that they haven't considered, rather than accepting that I have an addiction and I'll just like giving into it, or going, there's no possibilities that I can have anything else.
But they also have to make the choice. They have to want to make the choice. I like the line from Choice Theory. You either make the choice or the choice makes you. Like you can have the we can want people to have the motivation, but we can't spur that within them. They have to want to choose that.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting? Because isn't that not what motivational interviewing is spurring the choice within them? Like, isn't that what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, but there also has to be something within the individual on some level. Like Freud talked about a spark of life and a spark of death, or a fire of life and a fire of death. There has to be that spark there already, because if there's not, it doesn't matter how good, how honest, how earnest we are.
So I got a question for you then. Does that mean, for the people out there in the world that feel like I don't have that spark, does that mean, sorry, you're done, you're never going anywhere?
Okay, but here's what I would argue too. The fact that you're saying, I don't have that spark, means that maybe I'm considering that I might, but it's not quite strong enough yet. The fact that you're questioning and that you're wondering says that there might be something there.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. What about for the other people, the loved ones, the people that care about somebody that is just circling the drain in their processes and their decisions? Like, what about for those people that go, this person in my life, they don't have the spark? Does that mean that they're just doomed?
See, I don't know. Like, I think at that point, I think they need to work on themselves. And I think it's also about, saying, what do you want? What do you need? What is your motivation? What supports do you need in your life? And also, how can I support the person and respect their choice, so that that if and when that spark does come up, that it's something that comes from them.
Yeah, because I've seen some pretty massive turnarounds in my life from individuals that seemed like they would just never make a shift, and then all of us seems like all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
It's like they make this foundational change, and I guess it goes back to they were actually attempting to try to figure out their life the whole time, that they were moving through those stages of change.
Yeah, and I think too it kind of echoes back to, like you said, patience, and also to making sure that you're setting up the environment for that. It's like building a fire. You want to make sure that the kindling and everything is there, so when that spark does hit, that it can catch.
Yeah, in fact, it reminds me of a specific individual. Actually, it's not individual, a specific experience in the Calgary Counseling Center, coming back to the notion of the mandated people, that they had it set up in a way that the therapist worked with the individual until they moved to contemplation. And then when people entered into a group, they were actually being held accountable by other members of their group, not just the therapist or the co-facilitators. And so maybe there are some ways that this can happen that actually do honor the person's agency, while also helping from the outside. Because if it's not coming from the inside, then sometimes maybe some influence from the outside can create the spark that happens on the inside.
Yeah, I know, and I think you're right. I think encouraging, but just recognizing, I almost think about the idea where you can encourage, but if you're doing, like, as a therapist, we talk about, if we're doing more work than the client actually is, then
they're not going to change.
Exactly.
They're not going to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I think even as therapists we can almost feel like we're hitting our head against the wall, with certain people.
Sure.
But you have to ask yourself, if I keep doing this, what, as my mother would say, little seeds am I planting that will eventually take root?
True. And I did actually see in that program some massive changes from some people, and a few that didn't shift at all. So, yeah.
But you know what? They may not have shifted at that point, but who knows?
It was like 12 weeks. So it's not to say they never shifted again in their life. But maybe they only moved from contemplation to preparation, and they never got into action. And so for me to say that they didn't shift at all, maybe that actually represents the same thing that everybody else is seeing, is that they're not working at this. And maybe that's actually not right. Maybe they are working at it. They just haven't got as far along as I think they should have.
Yeah. And there again too, I mean, we're circling back to people's definition for change. Is it coming out from the outside, or is it coming from the inside?
Yeah. In fact, on that note, it's probably a great place to wrap up. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think that this is one of those fundamental things that we would like somehow to be able to create, somehow to be able to foundationally move someone so that they would be willing to better their life, and to have this conversation and recognize that it's multifaceted, and that it's really important that people reflect on themselves, understand where their motivations come from, where their barriers come from, in which they're not willing to look at things or to try.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'll say, sometimes we want life to be a movie where it's done in 20 minutes or 2 hours, or an 80s montage where you just quickly go through things and you're back on track.
Dun 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 dun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like where Rocky gets into shape in the last 20 minutes and he's able to go out and beat Clubber Lang. But
Getting strong now.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, that montage, while it may capture the spirit of what happens, like, you know, real, true, sustainable change is not just gone through overnight, but really it's like building a brick wall, one brick at a time. And if you want real sustainable change, you got to put those bricks down in place. And rather than looking at the wall, like Will Smith said in his book, you know, focus on one brick at a time.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
I'm Trent Akers. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message has been as meaningful to you as it has been to us. If you're looking for help, you can find us on Facebook at Humanizing Mental Health.